Just opening up the floor to questions. Yeah.
I guess it's in three. I guess the question is in 3 parts. Firstly,
Okay,
Firstly, to YouTube, there was a really moving speech at the start of this about talking about hate speech. But I know that's the thing, but they're organisations. Can we say their name that they're specifically in fear of? Like, can it not be he who must not be named? Is there a Voldemort that we're talking about? I mean, I can lean to gather that, but I would like to know that if it is that we're countering what it is that they would like us to do. The second one, I guess I'm talking to Mo and also to Jeremy. Being in the social change arena, I hear a lot of words thrown about that I feel are slowly starting to lose their meaning. Influencer, change maker. And so, but how do we create positive videos? So that was for Mo and for Jeremy. And then also, again, to Mo, how do we rationalise the debate on both sides? Because, I mean, I see organisations like UPF, I guess, how do we ask it and how do you really come into, beyond a safe space, a neutral space? So they're my questions for you all.
You've got 2 questions, Mo, so I might ask mine.
So how do you rationalise?
Yeah.
We'll go backwards. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I was asking that as I was being pepper sprayed at one of the rallies in Melbourne, where they were because I joined this group which is like it's called No Room for Racism, and they were sort of I didn't really know that they were sort of this bunch of like anti-fascist far left kind of guys. They're like, we've got this little rally coming on and come along, you know, with the UPF, and well, yeah, sounds good, and go there, and next thing there's like police, you know. Everywhere, and then someone broke the blockade and the barricades, and we went through, and yeah, you know, it's like seeing them all getting punched in the street, and I'm thinking to myself, surely there's a better way. And that's the thing. I mean, sure, those guys, those people, they, I think, yeah, they're not the sort of intellectual type that, you know, you can necessarily reach with. But what I definitely agree with is, I mean, at its core, now this is going to sound a bit like, but like at the end of the day, we all want to be, so I think, loved and respected. Maybe more respected than loved, I think. Probably we just want to be respected. Loved's
hand in hand.
And
Love's a bonus.
And I think, like, you know, having seen some of those people, having chatted to them, like, I feel sorry for them, I really do. But I don't necessarily think in that case it's about saying, okay, here is my 9 logical points that I'm going to think. It's about also, like, what's driving you? Like, what is it that's really... And quite often, they're a lot of things, you know. Sometimes you look at them as just, well, you're just a narcissist. But then sometimes, like, yeah, you're doing it tough. You're completely forgotten. Life did not end up as it should, or as you thought it would, or as it should. So I think for those people, sometimes it's just about kind of, I think you've got to make a call. Sometimes it's also not about them. Like, I have no doubt that the leadership of that group are not people that you necessarily want to engage with, but it's who are they influencing on the onion ring of influence. Absolutely. I think those people you can, and again, it's not about being intellectual with them. Sometimes it's just about trying to understand what's going on for them. It's no surprise that their new hotspot in Melbourne is Melton, which is an outer fringe suburb with no infrastructure. People really upset there because of other things. So I think that's definitely the one thing there is to try and just work out what is their motivation.
The other question was, how do you actually...
Well, it's about the
positive
rhetoric, I think.
The rhetoric.
Yeah, I guess I'm a bit of a rhetoric anarchist. I like to dismember any rhetoric, especially when it gets... And Aboriginal affairs, for anyone that sort of walks or dances in the circle of Aboriginal people, we certainly live and breathe the rhetoric that gets labelled upon us. And even in businesses and worlds, we hear this cultural awareness and cultural competence and trauma-informed and intergenerational trauma. Well, what is it? What is that? You know, and so the only thing I can ever do is actually live and breathe the person that I am, and let other people use words to try and define it, but just stay true to who I am. That, you know, I know that, like I said, culture, you know, it's one of the biggest things that I've said to my children, is that culture is not a cape. You can't change that. You are an Aboriginal person. You come from Goko Yarranj, you come from Yolngu, you come from Banjalang, you come from Dangari. They are your peoples. That is your ancestry. That is who you are. That is not a costume. Mm-hmm. You know, at Halloween, you can put whatever costume you want on, but you will still be this. You know, and that's, you know, all those things I try to shape change and cause change by being, you know, as much of me as I possibly can be, and then let everyone else worry about the labels, because, you know, people then are going to try and say, wow, wouldn't it be great if every Aborigine was like him? Well, no, it'd be boring as shit, like if we're all the same, right? Like it would, you know, it's one of those things that every time I hear Noel Pearson stand up and speak, everyone goes, wow, you know, wouldn't it be great if everyone was like, no, it wouldn't. You know, like we as people, we are books, you know, like I like to, you know, as humans, we're books. Every one of us has our own unique story. It would be boring walking into a library if every book was exactly the same. You know, and that's the thing, is that we have to encourage the person that sits either side of us, the person that sits in front of us, or even the one that's standing behind us, to be brave enough to tell their story, because by telling the story, you eradicate the rhetoric.
Hi, my question is for Jeremy, and it's specifically around your point around, I guess, the journalists and commentators. You mentioned the specific example of Caucasian commentators speaking about race. How do members of communities that are underrepresented in these narratives champion their own stories and in ways that do not reinforce otherization? So, for example, if they were to create their own show, just by doing so, it sort of reinforces that difference. So,
yeah, I guess I've done every. The police can always find me. Jeez, I mean, if anyone wants to comment in the media, they could always find me. I've spent a lot of time making myself available to people, and I think that's one of the heartbreaking things for Aboriginal people that are in these positions where we share our voice, we share our heart, we share our soul, is that we're so readily available, yet people don't call us when we need to have a voice. You know, so when they want to talk about, you know, on the drum, you know, I get caught up in the drum to talk about family violence, you know, sure, it's relevant, but when they talk about, you know, sort of one of my best friends in Adam Goods getting booed, no one wants to talk to me about it. No one wants to, everyone else has an opinion. And so it's sort of like you call the Aborigine when it's convenient versus when it's always, like, this is part of the fabric, it's part of everything that we are as Australians. And, you know, it really is, it's, you know, that takes us constantly knocking on the doors of the media network saying, don't forget us, almost begging to be heard to ensure that our voice can be heard. And, you know, I guess I've resigned to the fact that I'm happy to do that, because if I can keep begging, and if I spend my life begging to be heard to create change, then my children and their children will never have to beg again.
So this is a question for Widyan. Now, I've heard people in the past say, I was listening obviously very intently to what you were talking about. I've heard people in the past say, or have issues with the term identity crisis, right? Now, this is something that you pulled up that seems as though it's something that's become all the more relevant to you somewhat recently. And especially when you said now that, you know, ever since coming here, this is a point in time when you felt more un-Australian than ever before. So I just was hoping maybe if you could expand a little bit on that, especially given your recent trip to Iraq, and maybe if you could talk just a little bit more about that and how that sort of came to being an identity crisis for you.
Yeah. So when I decided to go to Iraq, I was born in Saudi Arabia in the refugee camp. So since then, I hadn't ever stepped foot on Iraqi soil, but had always felt very, very connected. And my parents weren't allowed to return until Saddam was toppled in 2003. So I never actually had the opportunity to go up until a few weeks ago. I think because I was so far away from Iraq, because I grew up knowing my parents' heritage and their story and our ancestry, I felt that immediate connection, and I felt that sense of longing and belonging to Iraq. With that being said, I was very happy with telling people that I'm an Australian Iraqi. So that for me was never thrown into question. When I went to Iraq, I guess what shook me the most and started to bring on this identity crisis, and as I said, I'd never really experienced that before, was people telling me, a taxi driver telling me, oh, you're one of those. You're really not from here, but you'll say you're Iraqi, but you really haven't done anything for the country, or you guys left us behind where you're now living a life of privilege. And I completely understand where people come from in terms of making that assumption. And certainly I'm living a more privileged life than perhaps most people in Iraq. But for me, it was almost as if I wanted people to make sure that they were welcoming me, that I did belong in Iraq, because all these years I'd romanticized what it would be like, and going there, that wasn't the reality. And it was a very, very harsh reality for me to come to terms with. So, and then coming back to Australia, and I guess in the last couple of years, seeing what the constant media discussion is about Muslims this, Muslim women that, hijab this, terrorism that, it became so overwhelming. Is that all that we are? Is that all that I am? Just this exotic Muslim woman who doesn't belong here and doesn't belong there? And that was, I feel very overwhelmed. As a Muslim woman right now, I feel very overwhelmed. I don't know where I fit. I don't know where I belong. I don't know anymore if, the person sitting next to me on the train doesn't really want to sit next to me because they're afraid of who I am. Or, it's almost as if I've been displaced by the constant, propaganda and the constant talking about what I should be as an Australian Muslim woman, other people defining me. And I feel defeated in a sense that I don't know where I belong exactly, and that I've allowed this discourse to take control of my life in that sense. But I haven't allowed it. That's just the reality. And I'm sure other Muslim women in the room right now, they may agree with me, they may disagree with me, but we are so overburdened. When something happens and we go out on the street, people look at me for an explanation. I don't have an answer to why people become terrorists. I don't know. Go ask them yourself. So it's almost this expectation that I'm the flag bearer for not only Islam, but at the same time, I've got this double responsibility of making sure that I act and talk and behave in a certain way so people say she's a good Muslim woman. She's one of the good ones. So I'm stuck. My identity, I'm Australian, I'm Iraqi, I'm Muslim, I'm so many other things, but I don't know where I belong, And that's sad a little bit. But sorry to bring the room down.
Sorry. One last question. Yes.
My question is for James. So I'm of the belief there's been... Jeremy, sorry. First of all, can I just share
call me whatever you want, bro.
for those who might doubt that Australia is a racist country. In Western Australia, we incarcerate Indigenous people at 9 times the rate that they jailed black people during apartheid South Africa. Another number is that if you're an Indigenous person in this country, you're 15 times more likely to get arrested for swearing, of all things, which is meant to be part of our culture. So I'm of the belief that there's been a deliberate attempt to hide the Indigenous oppression since invasion, because if people did see the truth, it could collapse the systems that the colonialists created. And as a migrant Muslim, I got my citizenship in 2002, and suddenly I was awarded with a world of privilege, but no one ever told me it was, and very much still is, at the expense of the freedom of your people. So my question, and I worded this particularly, what role, not how can we help, but what role do you want us to play?
That's a good question.
I think it's the same role that everyone in this room plays, and what I would hope the country is, don't walk against us, walk with us. Is that I go right back to the beginning, is that when I talk about the pain, the suffering, the circumstances, I don't want anyone to feel guilty. I just want you to help hold part of this burden, is that, and that's the big thing, is that I spend my life, 3 days out before my grandfather passed away, I said to him, old man, I said, "Napat yopere na yaranje na maui." It's like, what is my cultural obligation as a Yaranji person? And my grandfather said, "Yaranji na napuri, dungana na yore na mama na bubu."
which simply means it is your obligation as a Yalanji person to take that brother or sister by the hand and walk them across your country so they feel what you feel when you walk on your country. And, you know, the only way that I could ever do that with people is to take someone by the hand and walk them across our country so they can hear, so they can smell, so they can listen to the songs that we listen to when we are walking on this country. And that means not just the beauty and the mystery of our ancient traditions, but it's also the tears that well in our eyes constantly, that well and that seep in my heart. You know, but the reality is that by making people aware of the pool of tears that just does sit at the bottom of my heart, it makes it easier for me to get up and walk together with everyone else.
Thank you very much.